Welcome to the 27th annual Yesteryear Farm Show at the Doherty Museum in Longmont, Colorado. We're so happy to be here, and a beautiful day today. In the day when these engines and these separators were working, it was done by 15 people. The engine has been set, the belt is straight, lined up. You see that there is a distance between the steam traction engine and the separator. That's because they didn't want the sparks from the engine hitting the straw. There's also a twist in the belt because the machines are facing each other. To get them to run the right way, they have to put one backwards, basically. We've got Jim DeBaker's 1909 Case 40-horse engine on the separator. We've got the belt aligned. The separator is ready. Our straw boss is on top of the separator. We have our bundleman in the wagon ready to fork the bundles into the feeder. I'll explain the process on the steam. We're using wood today. If we were doing it full-time all day long, we'd have coal to keep a fire. A lot higher BTUs out of coal. Jeremy DeBaker's up on the engine. He's going to be the engineman today, but the chief, the captain of the whole process, is a straw boss on top of the separator, and that's Tom Luco. Harvey Nelson is down on the ground watching the belts. He'll put belt dressing on some of those. Those are rubberized canvas. If they were brand new, they'd be shiny black, but you can see a little white through there, so the canvas is starting to show. Those belts are probably 50 to 60 years old. On the wagon, the bundleman who will be forking the bundles in. On the south is Dave Brown. On the north, Bob McCarty. Harvey Nelson, 82 years old and still doing it better than anybody else here. Ken Howe, part of our group, almost to the same age as Harvey, and they're the hardest working guys out here. When Tom sees that everything is ready to go, he'll give the high sign to Jeremy. Jeremy will bring the engine slowly up to speed. The separator, you're going to hear it vibrate and rumble, and it will get going. The guys, once they feed the bundles in, they'll go in on the feeder. You can see the rotating band cutters. Those will chop and start to chop the grain up. It'll also take the twine off. They drop down into the sieves. The sieves are working back and forth in the machine. Two sets of sieves in the front. That is basically a shaker table. What you're hearing right now is a safety release. We have to bring the engine up to pressure to get enough to power the separator. We run at about 80 to 120 pounds per square inch. Now, to give you a comparison, the steam locomotives that the Union Pacific runs out of Cheyenne all over the country, those big engines run at about 300 pounds per square inch. Once that stops, we'll get going here. We follow strict guidelines and safety measures. Those engines are all inspected per state regulation and certified. Once the bundles hit the feeder, the band cutters down into the sieves, and then there's a pulley that you see at the kind of towards the top of the machine here, and it's right in the center of the machine, and that is the cylinder, and that beats the grain. So we're separating the straw, the chaff, from the grain itself. The grain is heavier, falls down to the bottom. And we've got a fan at the bottom there and a fan at the back. The fan at the bottom fluffs the straw and pushes it upwards. The grain continues to fall downwards. It hits this bottom here, and there's an auger bringing it over to this side to an elevator, and you can see the two chutes. Point to the elevator there on this side, Tom. Now, the grain comes up that elevator and there's a measuring, and you'll see that dump every so often. That's measuring the bushels of grain. As they come down, they go into a trough, and an auger carries it to the far side of the machine where it goes into the grain wagon on the other side. Now, when the machines are completely stopped and we're done with the process and also done with the baling, go to the back there on the west side and you can look in the grain wagon and see the grain. The straw is carried then to the back of the machine, and there's another big fan that blows it out the tube in the back. You'll see all of this process start to happen once we get going. Okay, now we're going to start up. Tom is signaling to bring the separator up to speed. That is a 1926 Belleville separator built at the Harrison Machine Works in Belleville, Illinois. It's a model 3660, bought by Gus Reichert of Boulder. He's checking to make sure everything's in order. He's given the signal to start forking the bundles into the feeder. He's going to check and make sure they are starting to go through okay. The straw boss is constantly checking everything. He will be the one to signal a stop or a go to the engineman on the steamer. Again, into the feeder, the band cutters, dropping down into the sieves, separating the grain from the chaff. There's one thing, one part, an important part that I didn't tell you about before. On the far side, right by where Tom is standing, is another elevator. That brings grain around again that hasn't been processed fully. It goes back into the machine at the head and goes through again to process for more grain. Very efficient system. Every once in a while in that chute you can see the unprocessed or grain that's being reprocessed going back over and up in the front. Now, every once in a while, Tom is over by the measuring scale, and you'll see that little cup dump. Again, measuring the bushels going into the grain wagon. On the top of the steamer, you see the mechanical device. That's the governor. As they increase the speed, those weights will fly to the outside. It'll keep the speed constant. All of the cases are single cylinder as opposed to the Avery, which is a two-cylinder. Tom is checking the quality of the grain as a straw boss would in the field. We go through about half a wagon of grain per demonstration, and then we'll do some baling. Last year, as you know, it was a very moist year, and the machine was bogging down and throwing belts. This year, it's been going through very clean each time we've done the threshing. In this day and age, you had one engineman and usually a fireman on the engine. People bringing in wagons of coal and water wagons to the engine. You had people bringing in the bundle wagons, the bundleman forking the bundles into the machine. You have the straw boss on top. You have one person on the ground walking around checking everything. Then you'd have people taking the finished grain to the silo. The person on the ground would be moving the chute back and forth to distribute the straw, because keeping in mind, when we do our binding, we are doing about an acre and a half of grain, where most farms, 300-400 acres. Nowadays, with a combine, they do 1,000 acres. They're giving the signal to stop. Looks like maybe have a belt that jumped. Folks, we're going to have to stop our threshing demonstration. The belt didn't just come off, it broke. So we're going to have to fix that later. We're going to come over and move to the hay press and the baling demonstration, we're going to use a 1922 McCormick Deering hay press, and we're going to make some bales out of this straw. This has been one of the driest years on record. The grain was very short this year. We're using barley. We usually go barley or oats. A local farmer donates a field. We go out there and we use a 1947 binder. Good size operation. Harvey Nelson has the Case tractor started. It is also a belt drive to the stationary hay press. Again, now balers are all basically they're automated now so that one person can run a baler. On this process, you had one person on the tractor, 3 people or 4 people on the hay press. 1922 McCormick Deering. Now you'll see the plunger going up and down. That pushes the straw. The straw will be forked in right at the top, pushes it down into the machine. Then there is a piston which pushes the straw to the back of the machine. At the back of the machine we have a guide that crimps or presses down on the straw, keeping in mind that it was a real short grain, short straw, and it's going to be harder to compress. You'll also see some wood dividers sitting on top of the machine. Every once in a while, one of those dividers is inserted into the injector, and one of the guys will flip the lever and the piston will push it down into the straw. Now, how do you keep the bales together? Well, you start out with Tom on the right-hand side of the machine, which is our left. He has a wire. He feeds it through the wood separator and then goes around to the other, goes through and over to Dave Brown, who will be on the other side, pulling that, pulls the wire, pulls it to the back, feeds it through the other separator, the wood block, feeds it back through to Tom. He threads it through an eyelet on the end of the wire, pulls it tight, ties it off. That happens on the top and the bottom of the bale. You know, back in the day when they used these machines, one family would own the engine, the steam engine, one family would own the separator, and another family would own the hay press, and they would go from farm to farm, helping each other, getting the crop in. Farm families typically had a lot of kids. That was the workforce. Now this is a very pleasant day. Can you imagine doing this at 105 degrees in Nebraska? The Case has steel wheels. Originally, all of the tractors came with steel wheels. As they started paving roads, they couldn't have the steel wheels with the lugs on them, so they went to the rubber tires. For a time, each tractor company offered an option to the buyer of either steel wheels or rubber tire wheels. At the time these pieces of equipment were used, there were 100 companies making each of these pieces. Now, in terms of tractors and farm equipment, it's all consolidated into about 5 companies. Let me describe a little bit about the steam engines. The one they're working on is a 1907 Avery Contractor Special, and it's what they call an undermount 2-cylinder. The Avery is a 22-horse, 2-cylinder undermount, as I mentioned. Traction engine was the formal term. Owned by the grand and great-grandchildren of Jerome DeBaker of Boulder. The first thing they ask is, how much does this weigh? 17 tons. What they're doing, the smokestack had broken, and they had to repair that and get it remounted. And they're just installing the heat shield again on the inside of the smoke box. Now, a little bit of a description on the steam engine. You've got the firebox in the back where you put the wood or coal. The hot air then goes through the tubes, which are the boiler. So the water surrounds the tubes, and then the hot air comes out as smoke and up the chimney in the smoke box in the front. And those were powered, those pulled plows. They did road work.
Must be a messy job.
They put them on the threshing machine with the belts. And one thing that you'll see if you go to Rolog, Minnesota, where they have, we have 4 engines, and in this state, that's pretty rare to get 4 all together. And they're all owned by the same family. In Rolog, they have 100 plus engines, steam engines, every year. It's a huge show. They have a tractor parade that takes 2 hours with a line of 2 that go through it simultaneously. But what you'll see there is one of the biggest lumber operations, and that's how they generate money for their show, is that they sell the lumber that they process utilizing a steam engine as the power source.
Hello, I'm Ellen D. Baker and I'd like to welcome you to the 27th Annual Yesteryear Farm Show. This is the exhibit of steam engines that we've brought to the show for the last 25 years, and we'd like to share a little bit of information about them. The one here on the left is a 1907 Avery. That is the one that started all of us, the whole family, into having steam engines. Our grandfather, Jerome D. Baker, purchased this Avery steam engine. It's a 22 horsepower locomotive special. He purchased it in Meade, Colorado in 1915 and drove it home to Boulder. It took a couple days in order to get it there because they move really, really slowly. He used the steam engine for threshing and for plowing the fields with the 12 bottom plow for called scarifying or grading the road. He graded Arapahoe Road with it for the State Highway Department, and miscellaneous other assorted things that you do with steam engines. And in about the 1950s, when the steam engine had been retired from being used on a normal, an everyday basis with the farm, they started steaming up the engine a couple times a year for friends and family to have fun with. At that point, different people in the family decided they wanted their own steam engines. We kind of grew the hobby, and one of Jerome's sons, Harold, purchased the steam engine here on my right, which is a 1906 Case steam engine. It's about a 40 horsepower steam engine, and he used it, just for playing, having fun, teaching the kids how to work with the steam engine and to show off to friends and family. The family, numbers of them were members of a steam club, and the steam club purchased a steam engine to restore in State Bridge, Colorado in the 1950s, and that one they purchased is the one right behind me, which is a 1909 Case steam engine. It also is a 40 horsepower. It was in pieces in State Bridge. They brought it home and started taking it apart with the idea of restoring it. At that point, they figured that, it's going to cost money to fix it, and people didn't have the money or didn't want to put in the money for fixing it, so they ended up all selling parts of it to Stuart Anderson. Stuart was one of Jerome's son-in-laws, or grandsons, excuse me, one of his grandsons. And so Stuart owned it. It was in pieces there on his property, and about 10 years ago, my husband Jim and I purchased it from Stuart to restore and brought it out for its 100th birthday for the first time in running condition, and we figured over 60 years to this show. It's back here again this year, and it's great to have it operational. And Stuart also bought an engine of his own in 1990 to bring back to the farm. He went to Crescent, Iowa, and purchased the engine on our far right, and that engine's a 1917 Case. It actually is about the same horsepower as ours, but it's a lot larger and has a canopy that's on it, and did not need a lot of work in restoring, just a little fixing up so it works. We've been operating all 4 steam engines for the last, 60, 70 years off and on as they came into the family, and having fun bringing them to the show and showing them off to people. Jim, you want to tell us some about the steam engines and growing up with them?
I'm Jim DeBaker. I'm one of Jerome's grandsons, and I remember the Avery as a kid, and we used to have what we called a steam up. On Sundays, we would get together with the steam club family. We'd have a potluck dinner and have a steam up. And I remember we couldn't go to the steam up till we'd gone to church. So telling everybody at Sunday school, we're going home for a steam up. And people would look at you like you're crazy. And it's like, well, doesn't everybody do a steam up? Apparently not. And so that always brought some interesting remarks, and just growing up around it with my uncles, and a little bit about my grandfather. I don't really remember him. He passed when I was very small, but the family had always loved the steam engine, and that was just part of our family and part of growing up. We eventually, as my wife said, we eventually bought this one here, and we have family and friends that like them and have donated hundreds of hours of labor and advice and everything, from nasty scraping dirt, grease, and soot to helping to paint them, to bringing them to the show and helping us operate them. And that's really what we enjoy doing. On my right is Bob Condon, and he is also one of Jerome's grandsons, and this is his engine. I'm going to let him tell a little bit about it.
Hi, I'm Bob Condon, and I definitely did grow up with the Avery, and with Jerome around and talking about a lot of different stories about when he was really out working that engine all the time. But developed an interest. The little case here came to our farm in sometime in the mid-50s, and it was sat there, never worked on for a long time. Harold started to put it together, my dad, but he died before he ever saw it run. I got it running a few years later. It's an engine we don't know a lot of the history on. It finished its life on a sawmill down near Canyon City. As you look around on it, there's been various pieces broken. There's a lot of wear on the gears. So we don't know what all it did in its life, but it definitely did considerable amount of work somewhere. We did a major restoration on it about the same time Jim and Ellen were doing theirs, because a lot of these bearings and things were just cast iron on steel. And we had to bore wheels out and put bushings in them. And our friend Chris Stutzman helped us a lot with that. And so now we just enjoy running them. And this one actually runs almost every weekend in October at Cottonwood Farm, east of Boulder, our pumpkin patch. Anybody else want to get anything here? We'll let you talk to Linda here.
Yeah, all of the people here in front of the engines are grandchildren of Jerome. We actually have great-grandchildren of him as well. We're down in the 5th generation of kids that are around the engines at all times. So we'll let these guys talk a little bit about Stewart's engine.
Hi, I am Linda Anderson Biella. This is my sister, Kristen Anderson Bowen. We are 2 out of the 3 daughters of Stuart Anderson, who owns the 1917 case. We remember when he found that and he was able to get it back home. He was just so excited, and it was just his passion, these engines. It was in his blood. He would just get a smile on his face whenever he could work on them or see them running or have other people involved, especially the family, seeing the extended family being as interested in them as he was. I'm sure he would be thrilled. He passed on in 2010, but like I say, it's just so special to have all these 4 engines in the family, continue to be in the family, and to see the interest in the younger generation continue that tradition. It's just really special.
Growing up with these engines was always just something normal to us. We're like, oh, this is normal. And you'd try to explain to your friends at school what a steam engine was, and they thought it was, the train on the tracks. And so you'd have to try to explain it or eventually take a picture or something. Or what's a steam up? But, the Yesteryear show is a great opportunity for people who haven't seen this type of thing to come and experience it. And it's really, a piece of, the country's history and farming history and everything. And so it's really gratifying that the family keeps the engines going and running and keeps the history going.
Hi, I'm Susan DeBaker Barker. Jerome was my grandfather. We always like to take pictures of the generations around the steam engine, and one of the first ones of me in the steam engine is I'm in the window on the far side, on the passenger side. Grandpa's got his arm around me. All the grandchildren, and we had quite an age range because there was a big age range in children, are all over the back of the steam engine. Grandpa's got his arm around me. I'm 2, and it's probably August because I think that was their wedding anniversary, was sometime July, June. Okay, so it was summer. I'm the only one wearing a sweater because my mother was cold. So anyway, we have pictures of the different generations of all the kids on the back of the steam engine or the front of the steam engine or somewhere. And I remember the steam ups, and we would always vie for that passenger seat, because that person got to ring the bell and blow the whistle, which is very important. And I think of all the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, you have to be at least 4 before you appreciate the whistle. Otherwise, it scares the bejeebies out of you and you cry. But as the kids have gotten older, they have learned all about these engines, and they've learned how to operate them, they've learned how to care for them, and they've learned the importance. And I think that the grandpa's tradition, he was known as the grand old man of steam. And I think that we have some new generations of young men and women who really appreciate the steam and what it does and what it has done for farmers all across. Jerry, did you want to?
I think my cousins and my brother have pretty well covered it, but I enjoy coming here and seeing the young kids in that seat on the Avery, and just like me when I was that age, I thought that was my seat. And they each do too, so they're getting their indoctrination in the multi-generational aspect of these engines. It's hard in pictures to capture everything because they have a distinct smell to them as well. The smell of the smoke, the smell of the steam oil, it kind of gets in your blood. And that doesn't show up in the pictures. We all just sense it naturally.
And then with this whole process, we have lots of friends that are helping us out and keeping the engines up and going, and to have them here at the show and to help to run them. And Steve Montgomery and his family have been very instrumental through the years, and we consider them actually part of our family now instead of just friends. And so we abuse them and make them come and help. And Steve, you want to tell a little bit about working with the engines through the years?
Steve's grandfather, this is Steve Montgomery here, and Steve's grandfather worked for our grandfather milking cows for many, many years and helping out on the farm. And Steve has been around this stuff his whole life too, and as much or more than some of us, and we've all learned together. And so he's just as much a family as all of us, and it was very important to our grandfather to continue this as a family tradition, and of everything from a potluck dinner and everybody sitting around telling stories on each other and picking on each other or whatever. And so I'll let Steve share a couple of his memories with us. And here you go, Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Montgomery. The first memories come from just the Avery. When we were real young, 4 or 5 years old, we'd hear the whistle from our farm, and we'd go up and go to our grandpa and take us over to the Bakers because they got the steam engine out. And we would go and ride and hang around and play and for the day, and we would come home and just thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. And then over the years, it just is continued. Jim and I went to school together since we were, second grade? Something like that. So we've been friends for over 50 years, and at least, yeah. we just have a great time doing this.
So we'd like to thank you for listening and join us at the Yesteryear show. We are here every year. The number of engines that we have coming varies, but it is something that we do enjoy and we love to share with the public. So we thank you very much. Yeah, I think so.
So